General Protocol Spaces. Banking on Freedom.
Welcome, everybody, to General Bull 25 of N. We're going to continue to talk about business, doing commerce, business, investment, and so forth on Bitcoin Cash. Today, main focus is capital allocation, something we've thought about a lot, and hopefully everybody who invests and has done flip starters and so forth has thought about a lot as well. But let's make sure, and let's actually have this conversation. So this is another one where it's a very open topic. There's no right answers. There's a lot of wrong answers, but there's no one right answer. So if you have something to say, just raise your hand or send a message, DM, whatever, and come up and talk with us. And let's see where this goes. So I think Uname has come up with a list of things, and we've come up with a pretty long list of topics to discuss. But Uname, could you kind of introduce the subject for us and what we're going to be talking about and kind of the scope of what we're talking about here?
Can we do Can we do an off topic first? Happy having.
Right. Yeah. Happy having. Yeah. No problems. Everything went through after a giant pause where the miners worked up a bunch of blocks and they're like, okay, let's quit until later. They just dropped off the network. Yeah, which sucks, but
yeah, mostly uneventful. Things are a lot of those things are kind of expected when you ask miners to work at a 50% discount. But yeah. Okay. Anyway, so back on topic, capital allocation. So in case people don't know, Bitcoin Cash as one of the, I can't believe I'm saying this, but as one of the older coins, even if you count from the fork instead of the Genesis block, is also a classic Bitcoin coin. And what I mean by that is that we don't have pre-mines. We don't have a large war chest of allocation, pre-allocated capital to the team that they can just throw at whatever. So that's not what that's just not what we are. So unlike a lot of other chains where they set up and they come with $1 billion so that they can throw at anything, and they don't have to think very much unless that $1 billion runs out. We have to rely on people who either want to see the common projects on the chain that benefits everyone on the chain succeed, or people who want to invest and earn solid actual return profits on the chain. So that kind of money is much more constrained. People only take money out of their wallets for very good reasons if you can convince them. Instead of either this thing is a tax or this thing comes pre-taxed at the outset of the coin. So in order to do that, we do have to think a lot about how to get those capital, how to allocate those capital, and after you allocate them, how to execute what you allocated them for. And that on Bitcoin Cash has historically been a mixed thing. There are ups, there are downs. It's kind of mixed. So I figure that there needs to be somebody talking about this, and it might as well be us.
There we go. I invited Ben, so longtime Bitcoin Cash ecosystem contributor. Recently, I think working on some other things. But what's up, Ben? Welcome.
Oh, I didn't know I was going to be speaking. Thanks. Just excited about the contracts on Bitcoin Cash after the last fork, and we're going to try to do something with that.
Okay, great. That's good to hear. I know you guys have always been working on interesting thing with tickets and so forth. I hope you've been excited to see the NFT tickets for the BCH Bliss conference. You know, one of the first times when a conference, the tickets are NFTs, and you bring them to the conference and you prove your ticket just by having the NFT. I hope you guys are liking that. I know that's somewhat in line with your work as well.
Unfortunately, ours was done on SLP, so that didn't work too well.
SLP had issues, yes. All right. Okay, so you're welcome, and I know you're a businessman also, so I hope you'll have maybe something to add to the discussion too. All right, so let's get on with it. So, which one do you want to cover first? Do you want to cover like businesses or the commons, or what kind of framing do you want to start with first?
I will probably want to talk about how people look at capital in general for any project, for profit or the either for profit businesses or just common quote unquote nonprofit projects. So the first thing I want to talk about is the amount of capital that people generally raise by any means, and I think that has relevance not just for people who want to start projects, run projects, but also for people funding the projects. People pledging on Flipstarters, people investing in businesses, or people buying tokens. I think that is a good thing that people should know. So we at GP we have gone through several years. We have gone through several years of ups and downs, and a few rounds of doing this. I think I think one thing we've commonly seen in, well, not us but in other places, is one tendency to severely underestimate what not just what makes for a successful project, but what makes for for the chances of a successful project.
Yeah, and you might want to. Are you going to go into the details of why you say that? Because by the nature of people underestimating it, I think they don't understand, and we didn't understand previously what it takes, and so people may be wondering what kind of things you're talking about.
Yes. So, and this applies to again, not just to businesses, but also any kind of project in BCH and even in other crypto. Which is that a lot of people think that, okay, I want to build a thing, I want to build. So in order to do that, I need like some people, maybe me, maybe some other guy, writing the code. And a lot of times people just stop there and then they say, okay, I estimate that it's going to take it's going to take 100 hours to write this code, and so 100 hours times however much people usually get for those 100 hours in terms of writing code, and that's the amount of money I'm gonna raise, and then that's what you raise, and then they raise it. You may or may not deliver it, but whether you deliver the code or not, what happens a lot is that the thing ends up flopping. And it doesn't just like flop. It doesn't just like, and then things happened and it flopped. But rather we see like it just like
Nothing even happened.
It was doomed from the outset. Like it's very clear from the beginning that it's going to die. There's no ups and downs. It's only down. And so Oh, and so hopefully people can see how obvious the problems is with this sort of thinking that okay, uh, I have a thing, I have a product in mind, and I will raise the money to exactly do that product, and then maybe it will succeed. That's just not how it works. um, okay.
Sorry,
Anything?
I was writing a note in a different forum to try to drag some people into the into the space. Yeah, this is absolutely a problem, and I know there's a bunch of people who have great intentions, us
Yes.
included, when we started, and completely underestimating the scale of what it is and what it's going to take. And you not only have to do the right things, but you also have to. No. What I want to say is, the number of things you have to do right is large. Right, there's a bunch of
Yeah.
things you have to do right. Like I said before, there's many ways to fail, there's many ways for that to happen. But I think what you're talking about is a specific pattern that we've seen with both commons and business oriented, but most of what people have tried has been tended towards commons stuff. Could
Yes.
you kind of say some of those things that you have seen where people fail? Where are the failure points? Like how is it that those fall apart? Because one of them is, you said, of course, the big one where they just say, look, it's going to take me 100 hours to develop this. And this already is a warning point where it's like, okay, what's your MVP? What's your smaller investment that you're going to do to prove the idea first before you put 100 hours into building something,
And
and so forth. So
yeah.
that's like has its own sub failure modes. But
Yes, and,
but
and
what
then
have you
there
seen? Yeah.
and then there's the other side of okay, what then after you get the 100 hours, and then presumably you're successful and you get the product. What happens? And we have seen that happen not just for individuals not just for individuals running projects, but even very large and established businesses. I would not name who, but people might be able to guess. That start internal projects, and then we obviously don't know how much money they actually put into this, but seems to just flop from a lack of follow up. Like that happens a lot. So so in order to not point fingers at specifically anyone, I would just talk about something that has been a common thing that's repeated on Bitcoin Cash several times over the years. And each time, they don't end exactly the same way, but they end sort of similarly, which is the point of sale systems. And people are probably kind of familiar with at least one or even a couple of them. Um, so Bitcoin Cash has, since its inception, been, we always like to talk about it as, yeah, it's the coin that we are going to buy coffee with, and in order to, and then the next question is, okay, in order to buy coffee, what exactly does it take? Sometimes on indie chains, on indie shops, you can just tell the guy, you can tell the boss who was also working the counter, to just take out his phone and accept BCH. But other times you need a point of sales, right? So that is an obvious project that people keep asking for, and people keep delivering. And every time, inevitably, they completely underestimate what it's gonna take, and then it flops because the pattern that we've seen repeatedly is that okay, you ask for a software, presumably it's a piece of software. um at the very most, maybe include a piece of hardware. That will be a very sophisticated project already. um and then I deliver the software. That software would look nice. It would run smooth, and then at the end, I put it at your doorstep, and then I leave to do something else. Or I have a hardware, and then I say, hey, you can order through me. But we look at but then we look at real life examples, right? Like, what does it actually take for a completely new payment brick and mortar payment machine system to become popular? And it's not it and it clearly takes a lot more than developing the software and then leaving it at that. You will basically have to do two things, right? You basically have to you basically have to push out to as many merchants as possible, and that has a huge cost. Apple, at the most extreme end of things, Apple Pay and Google and Samsung spend billions of dollars doing that thing. Um, they bribe, they beg, they hold seminars, whatever. Um, they do everything they can to scale it up, and that's just the nature of payment systems. If you don't scale it up, you may have an especially hard time keeping the thing going. And the other thing is that once you push it out, you become a solutions provider, and you have to keep providing those solutions. Um, and the people are like, oh, yeah, but wouldn't that be made easier by a trustless system like Bitcoin Cash? And that is true to a certain extent, but Bitcoin Cash doesn't. Bitcoin Cash, makes accepting and paying coins easy. It doesn't provide the whole solution. Like, and then like, people ask, oh, yeah, but I want a stability solution, right? And then things gone into different paths. Some of them more costly than others. Sometimes you, like, as seen in Townsville, you have a local guy set up a rudimentary thing that where people can take their receipts and sell their coins to you. It's sort of it, it sort of works, but it remains to be seen whether that scales. Um, and then sometimes people get Wall Street and then start a multi-billion-dollar stable coin, and some other times people will start a scrappy little company that uses smart contracts on BCH and try to marry speculators and people who want to hedge, right? So yeah, but either of this those solutions require long-term commitment and capital investment that goes way beyond delivering just the software or software plus the machines.
So let me try to take it up a level. Is this a good point? Can I do that?
Yeah. Go for it.
So if I try to wrap this up in simple terms, like an Eli 15 type of thing, the issues that you've identified here, one of them is network effect versus niche. Like, you really got to know when what you're doing requires a network effect, a really big network effect. If you don't even realize that what you're doing requires a large network effect, you're gonna die, right? You're not gonna make it. And because if you do require a large network effect, you better be ready to invest a huge amount of capital into acquiring that network effect and achieving that network effect. So that might be easier later down the road when BCH has larger adoption and you can, piggyback on the large scale adoption. But until that happens, you better be crystal clear with yourself whether the project you're working on requires a large network effect or not. Because if it does, you're going to need a lot of capital to achieve it.
well, even down the line, right? Even down the line, if BCH has achieved a lot of adoption, and the field is much wider, presumably by then you would also have a lot of competitors. So you
You'll
would
have
still need
competitors,
to think
right?
about this.
It'll be a different problem. Yeah, it'll be different though. So then you can do like copycats type stuff, right? Like I'm going to copy you and I'm going to do it more efficiently, which is a valid thing to do in some cases, right? But right now, that's not a valid thing to do. The efficiency you gain is not going to be enough to overcome the network effects at this point. And then the flip side of that is the niche, right? Where you say, okay, look, I'm going to do something specifically that works for a niche of people, and it's going to be so much better than the things that they already use that it's going to work for this niche of people. This is more or less where you must attack at this point. Do you think that's a fair point? Like you don't really have a hope of
Yep.
winning against large network effects at this
I
point
think,
unless you're extremely well capitalized.
this ties to what we talked about in the last episode, which is business model. Like in general, you see an extremely huge thing, you gotta think like, okay, how can I win against this thing? If you are not different from them and you are much smaller, you don't have anything that stands out, then you can't just do exactly what they do and then you out something that something, right?
Yes, yes. So that's one angle of it, is the network effect versus niche. Like you really, really must understand that for any project, whether it's a wallet or a library, like if you're at the coding level or if you're up at the business level of providing a service or a platform, you really have to know what it is that you're competing against and what people's alternatives are. Like, for example, to bring it to a real example with Flipstarter, right? People say, "Oh, look, Flipstarter is so amazing." Some people do. Some people hate, the complexity of it, whatever. But let's say you make a really easy to use one, like it's super nice, really easy user experience. Now, go compete head on with Kickstarter or with Patreon or something similar, right? Like that, right? You're just straight up going to fail unless you are very well capitalized to compete with them directly.
Actually, since you're talking about Flipstarter, that is actually a really good example. Like people have talked about, yeah, why do we use Flipstarter at all? Like too unnecessarily complex, right? You should just put up an address and accept donations. That's much easier.
That's a different that's a different issue.
But this actually ties really well into the theme, because the point of Flipstarter is that you give a good estimate and you write about why you need the kind of money you are asking for in order to succeed. And if enough people pledge, no, not donate, pledge. If enough people pledge, then in the end, the amount you are asking for is transferred to you, uh, in whole, in one piece, in order to give you a fighting chance. While if you put up an address and let people just donate, some of them donate, some of them don't, and in the may perhaps end of the day, you end up with like a small fraction of what it takes to succeed, and then those money just disappears into the void and is never seen again, because there's no chance. You're severely undercapitalized. The thing you're trying to do is not going to happen. And in the case, and then the people who donated money is upset, or I mean, maybe they're not upset. Maybe they just want to, buy you. Maybe they just want to buy you sandwiches. In which case, they're not going to be upset. But if they want to see your thing succeed, then when you are severely undercapitalized, you are not going to succeed, and that is part of the reason why people run Flipstarter campaigns, because they if they have a thing, they are asking people to pledge capital towards its success, then they would presumably want to make sure that there's actually enough capital that is transferred to make it successful.
Yeah, if I put it, I don't know, even shorter, right? Investors should be aware of these issues also. Investors, I mean people who support flip starters or something like that. You should be aware of these capital allocation issues. Is this project likely to succeed based on their, what they're trying to achieve? Because if they are, excellent, great, no problem. If they're not, then to some degree you're doing a disservice to them as well as yourself, of course, but also to them. Even if you just wanted to buy them sandwiches, as Uname said, you're doing them a disservice by not helping them to see, hey, look, what you want to do is really a good thing. However, is this really going to succeed? Are we just doing this to fuck around, or are we doing this to succeed and win? And I think the investors, the pledgers in these flip starters have a part in that they should be aware of these issues also. All of us should be aware of these issues also and say, hey, look, you really need to rethink this. There's no need to just take somebody at their first word and say, hey, look, you've considered everything, you've thought of everything, fantastic. Because in a lot of cases, that's not always the case. So instead of just, putting kid gloves on, it's okay to come back and say, look, you didn't think about these things. So yeah, I hope people who pledge to flip starters and so forth will have some tough love, right? A little bit of tough love on people. But going back to the flip starter itself as a platform, if you really want to say Flipstarter itself needs to compete with Kickstarter or Patreon or something like that, there's no way it can win unless you are very heavy capitalized and ready to go head to head with them.
Very heavy capitalized by BCH standards. Obviously if you think there are some inherent advantages, and we do with using BCH and our various smart contract abilities as a platform, then we can start with a lot less money than what Kickstarter has, and that is okay. But a lot less money than Kickstarter is probably still a lot more money than what people find at the back of their pockets. So
fair. But so the point I want to make though is you have to come ready for the game that you're actually entering, right? You got to know what game you're entering when you start one of these projects.
Yeah.
And the reason Flipstarter hasn't had to compete against those massive network effects and has had very large success is because it targeted a specific niche, right? That's why it has worked, because it did understand that there's things that need to be funded that make sense to be funded in BCH by BCH stakeholders. That's the niche where it works. And of course that niche can expand over time, but if we had listened to random ideas from the audience at the time we were creating it, they wanted us, some people, right, wanted us to, let's make a competitor with Kickstarter. It's like no, that's not going to work, right? So you have to know what you're aiming for when you get into it. You have to know what game you're playing and whether you can win that game or not. And that is true in any case, whether you're making, like I said, a developer library, like a low-level thing that other developers are going to use, you're competing against other things. You're competing against Square, for example, or Circle. You got to know what game you're playing. If you're making a product, of course, or a platform, it's the same thing. So that's one dimension of this, right? The niche versus network effect. You got to know where you are on that scale and really whether you're able to compete or not. Do you think that's fair? That's one specific dimension you have to be aware of.
Yeah. If we an extreme example, if we ask people to take Flipstarter and run with it and compete against Kickstarter, and they estimate that just give me like $20,000 and this will totally work. You should probably be skeptical about that claim. like $20,000 is probably not going to get you something that competes favorably against Kickstarter as a platform.
Right.
As a platform that has operations and whatever, it will like you pay the lawyer fees of operating, and that will probably consume like half of it, and then you know you have to think about what to do with the rest.
Right. And okay, let me bring this to the other example you talked about, point of sale systems. So there's some point of sale systems that have been quite successful actually in their niche. But when you come at it from a, hey, I'm going to make a point of sale for BCH that competes with, global point of sale systems. Really? Really? Is that really what you're going to do? Do you understand all of the services and benefits that a point of sale system today, a modern point of sale system, provides to a large scale business or to a small scale business? What benefits does it provide? Are you actually competing with that? Or are you doing something else? In all the cases that I have seen where it's set up to compete with, to serve large scale businesses, they do not compete. They are not competitive at all on all of those features that are being provided to people. So what niche is it that you serve? And the point of sale solutions that have worked are the ones, again, that are focused on a niche that doesn't require a gigantic network effect to work. And these are the ones that I have seen that work are like mom and pop type stores, right? Like single owner, where the owner can make executive decisions and has an interest, whatever, and they can implement this thing because they like it and it's what they want. And it works well for them and their situation. And it doesn't cause a lot of disruption to their business processes. Then it works. So that niche is a very effective niche to aim for. But again, the point here is know what game you're playing when you get into it. So that's the point of sale and flip starter. What other dimensions would you say are there? You name me, like this is the niche versus network effect. What other kind of dimensions are there that people should be looking out for?
Yeah, and there's the network effect angle of things, and you also gotta think what kind of ongoing maintenance cost that your project requires. And by maintenance, a lot of people think, oh yeah, that's easy, right? I write some software. I'm going to have maintained the code, and well, that's familiar. That's easy to estimate. Some people don't even estimate. Some people don't even consider that, and that is terrible. But let's just say that okay, you wrote the software, you publish it, and then you have a plan in place where you will maintain it for some time, and that is all well good. And then it still flops. And the reason it still flops is because a lot of people don't like. A lot of people have like a specific budget for okay, I'm going to write the code, and if they think a little more, they would have some plan for okay, I'm going to have some money for marketing, say. And the way they estimate marketing is that okay, I'm going to buy ads, I'm going to hire a social media manager or something like that. That is all well good, and then but a lot of times people underestimate the budget needed for general operations and by general operations I don't just mean like managing lawyers or accountants or whatever things like that. There are ways to quote unquote save on those things. There are ways to manage them so that they're cheaper, but rather in day-to-day operations, especially for a platform. Say if you run a marketplace, even if that marketplace is trustless, there's going to be disputes. There's going to be issues that come up, and if you run not just a marketplace but also a content platform of some sort, which we have seen in the past, also multiple times on BCH, then in order to be successful, you would even need to think hard and perhaps deploy some labor and capital into making sure the content on that platform is going the way you want it to go. I mean, you can leave it and leave it as is and say that it would just be completely free. It will be whatever people want to pay, whatever people want to post, and that is okay. And then you think that what's the worst that can happen, right? The worst that can happen is that people post a bunch of porn on it, and that's not the and whatever about that, and then you find out that the worst that can happen is not that people post porn on it. The worst that can happen is that people take advantage of your incentive system and post zero effort copy and paste things from other platforms, and then they game your system, and then you you under allocated your effort in and in this ongoing battle against this guys and other guys that would arise, and you're you're stuck in hell with no obvious way out, and it's a terrible situation. um so this doesn't just apply to platforms. This also applies to a lot of other things. Like, you have to think hard about ongoing operations. um you have to, like, in at general protocols even, we when we started out, we thought that, okay, we will have a smart contract thing. We should just write the library. Maybe we write a UI, and then the rest would just run itself. We even thought that, okay, we can we it's definitely very easy to find people to want to run this thing, for us or in partnership with us. It turns out nobody wants to run this. So we will have to run the thing, and then surely we can find people to surely people would just spontaneously come out of nowhere and then have a sophisticated setup to provide liquidity. No, that also did not happen. We actually have to go out and ask around. So things like that are ongoing costs that you have to are ongoing quote unquote maintenance costs that you have to take into account, operations that I think a lot of people underestimate.
Yes, so those are marketing, maintenance, all of the basics of business operations, right? Those things, again, whether you're doing a product or a platform or a service or even a development library, those are more or less all there in all cases. It's just, to a greater or lesser degree. You have to do maintenance, you have to get the word out, you have to get people using it, you have to convince people. Those things are all there. Yes, so absolutely. You have to, if you really want your project to be successful, you're going to have to invest in those things. And if you're not good at that, which is totally fair, very few people are good at everything. Nobody's good at everything, but there's very few people who, they're like they're just amazing people. They can do most things, right? They can market. They're good at marketing. They're good at visual design. They're good at writing copy. They're good at writing code. Man, those are just, you could just assume that they don't exist. You might get extremely lucky to find one of them every once in a while, but more or less those people don't exist. So you may need help, but just accept that you're going to need help and you're going to need other people to work with you. So you can't just get away from that and say, I'm just going to do a thing and fuck it. If nobody wants it, nobody wants it. No. Do you want it to be successful or not? Then you need to think about all these issues if you really want to establish something and make it successful.
Yeah, and the other Yeah, and the other thing, let's change it up a bit. The other thing that has to do with capital, that we have previously flopped, that we we as a company has previously, not exactly flopped, I will call it, fell into crisis on, is the choosing proper allocation among different units of account. Uh,
Ugh.
yeah, that was not fun. But it's something, and it's probably super obvious to some people, and not so super obvious to some other people, including us early on. So a lot of times this is something crypto specific, kind of. A lot of times you would recruit funding one one specific coin or token. Like a lot of, like Flipstarter natively collects funding in BCH, and I think that is. I think that is a good thing. And with cash tokens, eventually we may see people issue just tokens to recruit funding, in terms of ICO, or some other strategies, and that is fine. And then there's a general tendency to just put those coins, and to just leave those coins in cold storage, and then say that, okay, there are benefits to doing it exactly this way. Uh, One is that it's simple. I don't need to do anything else. I collect the funds in an address, and that's the end of it. And then I will just live off it. The other thing is that, okay, I will live or die with the value of my tokens, right? Or BCH in general, if it's Flipstarter or something else, and my interests will be aligned, which is all good. But then you run into a huge bear market, and your token crashes 90%, and then you are screwed, and and then there's nothing after that. So that is a huge trap. That has It's not just us. Like, historically, other BCH organizations have faced that problem. Has faced that problem, and there are entire organizations that basically fell apart, even though they were very well capitalized at the upfront, just due to this issue. And some of you might remember Bitcoin Cash Fund (BCF). That was a very glaring example. Um, so there are ways to deal with that, and you probably gotta think, from the outset, that how much capital do you want to allocate to something more stable, like uh, something US dollar equivalent, and how much money do you want to apply to getting your interests aligned, which usually means remaining in the native token of whatever you raise the fund with. Um, and then for the stabilization part, you have to further think about where exactly to put it, right? Like the aforementioned Bitcoin Cash Fund in its final days. I mean, it's been so long. It's okay to talk about this. I think it's not like everyone was just ignorant uh, about the need for stabilization, but then they thought that, okay, the way to stabilize is to get literal USDs, and as a nonprofit we'll have to do this properly. So they hire lawyers, very expensive lawyers, uh and then that operation went on for a while to get all the proper registrations and whatever. And then after several months and a lot of money dumped into lawyers, the thing was finally set up. But then it was too late. All the capital was gone, through depreciation and the aforementioned lawyer fees. And then everyone's broke. There's no need to stabilize anything anymore. That is super terrible. So you gotta wait. So you gotta weigh those. There are better options. Some people we were recommended, just straight up stable coins before. Uh, just straight up stable coins in other chains before, and today we are also proud to say that we offer some other options that doesn't involve putting your coins custodial with some with demand. uh, so there are multiple options. Think about them and think about the overhead and risk that's associated with each of them, and think about, and especially important, think about how much you want to put into stabilization, and when do you want to do it.
I can add a little bit of a summary to this. So there's a risk management technique called what's it called, least regret minimization, or least regret least regret minimization maximization. So the point is, in some cases you aim for the average, right? Like the average best case. We want to do the smart thing over time. But in these kind of situations where you're a startup, you're doing some kind of project that's just starting, in most cases you're either going to succeed or fail, and it's kind of a binary. And in those cases, it's sometimes smarter to do something like this, the least you want to make sure that the worst case of whatever your decision is not that bad. It may not be, making that decision may not be the best case. It may not be like, oh, if everything worked perfectly, it'll be amazing. It's more like a survival decision. If things go really badly, is this project going to be okay? If things don't go according to plan, is this project still going to be okay? That's more of a reasonable approach in these kind of one-off cases, as opposed to, you're doing something over time many times. So if the price, if for example with Flipstarter, you receive all your capital in BCH for the project, and then you might say, well, the price might go up. On average, maybe it's going to go up over the next 5 years. But your project is not going to succeed or fail over the next 5 years. It's going to succeed or fail over the next, handful of months in many cases. So make sure that whatever you do with your capital is going to let your project succeed, even in the bad case, even where the price of BCH falls 30% or 50% or whatever it is. So yeah, use risk. This approach of minimizing the worst case, making sure that you choose the least bad worst case. It's a good approach for that situation. All right, I'm trying to keep notes on some of these in the Twitter. I'm putting these in the thread here so that we can keep track of some of the discussion. What else do you have to bring up, Uname? What are some of the other things? Avoiding blowing all your money on lawyers, network effect, making sure you consider how to manage your capital and keep safe in the face of volatility. What else do you have for us?
So in terms so this is probably worth a whole other spaces on its own, but I kind of also want to talk about the combination of hiring and marketing in terms of what's commonly done, quote unquote, in crypto versus versus some of the less common things that we have seen. So again, this is not aimed at at a specific anybody, but it's just something super common that we have seen. So there's a tendency for especially well capitalized startups, but also for some but even some more established companies to say that, okay, we need to get into a thing. I think we know what the thing is. We will just hire the quote unquote the industry experts to do their thing. That happens a lot. And one glaring example, again, I wouldn't name names, but was a previous attempt by a relatively large business to run a full service custodial exchange. They basically grabbed some industry experts and set up all the common things that presumably people want on exchanges, and then off they go. The thing though is that crypto is a very curious place. In that it's not like it's not like you are in, say, the business of making airplanes, or if you're in the business of making airplanes, then yes, absolutely. You would probably want people who are, I mean, Boeing is kind of shit now. Maybe ex-Boeing guys, maybe, maybe you will want to grab some of the best people, try to recruit some of the best people and convince them to leave Airbus. Maybe you will want you want the best engineers. You want people who can talk to regulators. That you want people who can negotiate with airlines. You know where to find them, and there's a fixed set of things that you can get out of them. People know what to expect. But crypto is a weird place. There are two reasons why it's weird. One is that crypto as a field. I mean, it's been a long time since Satoshi published his white paper, but crypto as a field really hasn't been nearly as mature as some other fields. Um, it really hasn't been as mature as other fields, and the state of it is even worse. Like, a lot of times things that come up basically just relied on short-term speculation for its success. A lot of the trends that come and go don't really have any long-term business models, and people, and so a trend arises, people do the shit out of it, it's spent. People get tired of it, and then they move on very quickly. They move on, and that can all happen within just a few months, if not a couple years. So and then you grab quote unquote experts who are familiar to doing the last thing. It might not actually suit your needs for doing the next thing, and they might not have actual fundamental competence on whatever you're looking for underlying. And this is especially important if you are trying to do something that either is actually new, actually novel, or you are trying to do something that is sustainable. So yeah, we've seen some of that. This tends to happen a lot less on small startups that are less well capitalized, because these guys tend to charge like pretty hefty sums for their services, and these startups just don't have that kind of money. but but yeah, we've seen a lot of that, and those people would just tell you they would do all the things that sound good but are really boilerplate, like, go around this, the go around, get on the calendar. Maybe you are selling NFTs, whole flashy events in New York City or something like that, and then before you know it, $100 million of your capital is gone. Think really hard about what you want to do, right? And a lot of times, don't fall for the hype.
So I think Jonathan had some things that he wanted to put in earlier, but I think his audio may not have been working. Jonathan, are you there? Is this a good time to revisit some of those things that you wanted to say? Sorry if the timing is off here.
I think I'm here. Am I here?
Hey, I
Do
hear
you hear me?
I hear you.
Hey.
I hear you.
All right. Well, apparently the audio works at least. We're pretty far past what I wanted to talk about, but I'll just recap it quickly. So when we were talking about the flip starter, there was quite a bit of talk about the allocation side, like what does the actual assurance contract do? But I think flip starter is a more relevant and interesting topic in the context of like how do you make something successful, because it actually shows a well chosen niche to work with. Like we established before making it that there is already people funding the kind of targets that we wanted to fund. So the money was there, the users was there, the project was there, and it was just a matter of like acting at the glue in the middle, making it happen. So targeting a niche like Flipstarter can be considered an example of why that strategy works, like, or proof that strategy works.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Sorry, I wish the audio had been working so that we could have had that discussion at the time. But absolutely, yeah. You got to know what it is you're aiming for, and know what you need to do to make sure it's successful. And in those cases where it has been successful, it's a bit of an evolution, right? Where Flipstarter, when it was created, could do anything. Not could, it can. It can fund anything, literally anything. But where does it make sense? Where do people actually want to use it? And I think, 10 years, 5 years down the line, when adoption is much greater, that scope is going to be much larger. But today, where crypto is today, where very few people in the normal world are using it, that's the target, but the reality is very few are using it. Then uh, the places where it makes sense is a smaller niche.
Yeah, and we talk, we talk a lot of shit about the pitfalls of trying to make Flipstarter go big or whatever, but those are pitfalls. Those are not fatal flaws. We very much want somebody to take Flipstarter and give it, or not just this specific implementation, but the general concept, to try to go big and do a proper fundraise business model and go big as a platform. We really don't want to discourage anyone from doing that, just to be sure. Like if you have something awesome in mind and you want to do that, please do so. So
Okay, I have a different angle to bring up. You name about the profitability. So if you're aiming to start a project that's aiming for sustainability and being able to support itself, there's okay, no. You're starting a project that is for profit. You're aiming to make money, at least enough to support yourself. So this is where like you previously said, so-called nonprofits, like even if you're doing a nonprofit, even if you think you're doing something for the greater good or whatever it is for the commons, you still have to be able to maintain it. You still have to be able to support it. You're going to need some kind of funds, unless you're just independently wealthy to and independently motivated, both, and enough to fund other people and so forth. You're going to need some way to make it sustainable for it to be successful in the not just the extreme short term, but in some kind of medium or long term. So from that perspective, like what do you see on the whole profitability versus kind of growth hacking, the venture capital type business or startup or project? Because I have a pretty strong opinion, but I think you'll probably be able to frame it better. So how do you see that when people look at VCs versus starting up a cash flow type business? Like there's some scale there.
from the outset, like if you're trying to start a sustainable sort of business, crypto is especially hostile to this, unfortunately, and the reason is as especially hostile to this is because the whole space, as we talk about in our last episode, the whole space just runs on speculation, right? Like it's not just that, oh, there's some speculation to it, like the whole speculation is the space. Uh, so from the outset from the outset you're playing a hard mode. I mean, I think we are kind of playing a hard mode. One thing is that usually what people do is that they would try to, even if they're trying to run a sustainable business, they will probably try to incorporate speculation into some part of their business, into their business model. And the other thing is that the other thing is that, okay, this is as opposed to someone who's uh, this is as opposed to someone who is trying to grow at any cost and burn money and that kind of thing, and not trying to make money. So right, but in crypto that can be twisted even further. In in our usual understanding, okay, you get cash, you get a lot of cash, and you throw cash in order to get network effect, and then you worry about income later, right? In crypto, that can go up another level. You get cash, you get a lot of cash, you burn all of them to get not necessarily to get actual network effect, but you burn all of them in order to get more cash. Like your entire company is not even catered to is neither catering to income nor network effect or whatever. You are catering entirely to recruiting investors, and that happens a lot in crypto. And I don't have very good I don't think I have very good advice towards that. I just know that at least we are trying to take one step at a time and running a sustainable business. But it's kind of amusing to see what kind of things are playing out in other parts of crypto.
Amusing, yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess the three classes I just came up with listening to that were right. You're trying to come up with a cash flow project. You're trying to come up with a pump and dump. Please don't do that. Or you're trying to come up with a growth hacking VC type project where we've already excluded the pump and dumps of those growth hacking projects. Yeah, if you're not doing a cash flow, then you better really fucking know what you're doing. If you're doing a growth hack, you better be well funded and ready to survive for quite a long time as you grow, because you're just going to have to support it yourself. So again, I think this comes down to know what game you're actually playing. If you don't know what game you're playing, then you're probably going to lose unless you get very lucky. You think that's a fair summary?
Yep.
All right. I have one more thing that I want to ask about before, because we're already going over a little bit here, but I have one more thing that at least I want to cover in this one. And that is the commons versus business. Commons versus a profit. Maybe you could say it as for profit versus not for profit. There's various ways to frame it. But let's say commons versus business. Out of all the things we talked about, do you think those apply here? Are there any special lessons for this specific issue?
I mean, there are basically well, I wouldn't use it basically. There are several types of things that we have seen raising funds for, right? And this is not just limited to crypto. This applies to a lot of other places as well. So traditionally, you have okay, I'm raising funds for a for a common good, and people give money, and then I do some infrastructure, or I write a library, and that is all well and good. And then there is the polar opposite, which is that okay, I'm raising funds and I want to run a business. I will make myself money. I will make you money. Presumably, I'll make you money, and that's the end. Sometimes that spills a bit over into the comments, and sometimes not, but that's not the emphasis. But then things get a little blurry sometimes, because we actually see a lot of times that people raise funds for the commons, and with sometimes the express intention, or sometimes not with an explicit intention. Well, I usually prefer that they spell it out explicitly if they can. Of okay, later taking this thing and running with it, and going for and becoming a business. And then on the other hand, sometimes you raise funds for a business, but say that okay, I'm raising funds as a business, and I'm going to try making money for us and for you, but this is also a commons thing, because me running this business would have a positive effect on the commons, and this is why you should fund it. Things get a little blurry between the two, and there are multiple ways to go at it. Um, you know, I would certainly say that people who invested in, say, general particles, there's a good part of it is about general particles making money, and BCH is a good way to make that money. But a good part of them probably also thought that funding general particles is a good way to advance BCH as a whole. So that is a common thing. And I'm yeah my general take on this is that there's no right or wrong for anything anywhere on the spectrum, but usually it's better to spell out the intentions at the outset, so that people won't be upset down the line. Like, if you are raising funds, and you're raising funds for a business, and your intention is to also advance BCH as a coin, a thing, then you might have a different set of investors versus, say, that I'm going to make money at any cost. And if you raise funds from people who want you to make money at any cost, then later you might face uncomfortable questions like, okay, yeah, but BCH is a small place. Why don't you spend a lot of effort transplanting your project onto Dog Elon, like Doge Elon Musk coin, where they can dump $10 million at you? Why don't you just go ahead and do that, and you face disputes? So I think as long as you are as explicit as possible, things will be better.
I guess from my perspective, the projects that are made for the commons are kind of gets into that place where you said again, in quotes, not for profit. It's like, well, it's not for profit, but the only reason people are supporting you is because it's for profit, right? It's just not a profit coming directly from you. And that's an important thing to understand about the niche that you're working in. Again, back to that niche versus network effect. The niche you're working in is one where you're going to be funded by people who will profit from the things that you do working well and having some kind of big impact. So when you're making these commons projects, this goes out to the developers out there, right? Because I'm one also. You can't just think, well, this is the thing that I personally want to do. That's fine in the development world and open source software world, where it's something that you're just going to do yourself and whatever, it's just for you. You have to think, this project that I'm working on, what impact is it going to have actually? Is it going to have a big impact in the short term, medium term, long term? If it's just long term, you better not expect a lot of funding, because I mean, it's one of those things where, okay, I'm going to put a ton of money into this project that's going to benefit everyone, 10 years down the line. Okay, that's kind of a hard sell unless you have a philanthropist who's really, really long thinking, right?
Well,
So you need to think.
the thing about long term things is not just whether people can think long term, right? It's not just people have short short very short time preference. It's not just that, but also that you say it's gonna be good in 10 years. In 10 years, will any of us be around? Would the whole field be around? I don't know, right? The longer term it is, the more uncertainty there is to them. So there's also that.
Fair. But yeah, so my main point though, when you're working on something, whether you're a developer working on a low level library or a product or a platform or whatever, just ask like who's going to benefit from this. And there's this additional dimension, as Uname was talking about, where in this shared public network that uses speculation to bootstrap adoption, you have what would normally be considered an externality, where there's people who are invested in your success, not due to the success of your project specifically, but due to the impact of your project on the overall network. And you should consider that, because that may be at this point the largest impact you're going to have. And I think one of these examples is the Bitcoin Cash podcast. Jeremy couldn't come online to talk about this right now, but and he may disagree or agree with me, I don't know. But from my perspective, the reason that podcast has been funded so well over time, repeatedly, is he does all the things that he needs to do. He does the due diligence and the homework and the marketing and all the stuff that we have talked about here. And he's picked a place that is going to have large externalities, where his project specifically is not earning a ton of profit, right? He's not getting tons of money from everything that he's doing at all. But what he's doing has a big impact on the overall network and the larger set of stakeholders. And so he gets a lot of support, which is great. And if you're a project, you need to understand that. And why is that his project gets a lot of support and maybe some others don't? It's because his attacks the specific thing that people think is going to make the network more valuable, right? Because that's where the profit is. Does the price go up, more or less? What he's doing is going to impact that. Is the thing that you're working on going to impact that or not? You have to consider these, right? You can't be naive. You can't be a pure developer. You can't be a pure anything. You've got to look at several angles of whatever it is you're going to work on. All right, Jonathan, Uname, did you guys have other main points you wanted to cover before we wrap up? We've gone over a bit today.
I think this is a good point. I think this is a good point for at least me to call it a. Maybe we should open the floor to see if other people want to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Please raise your hand. Come up. Usually people don't. BCH is a very quiet, reserved ecosystem in a lot of cases. But yeah, the floor is open. So please put up your hand if you'd like to come up and talk about any of the topics. Jonathan, did you have anything else you wanted to cover before we wrap up?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. So while I'm waiting for hands, which I'm not expecting to come, but maybe one of you guys will surprise me. But I wanted to mention the jogs.one, JOGS.ONE, jogs.one. This is the Journal of One Surgery, which Saqib Noor, the surgeon, Saqib Noor has created. And this medical journal is using BCH. And I think it's another one of those cases where he knows his audience and the needs of his industry very, very well and very deeply for many decades. And so he has created something that meets a particular need. And he is using Bitcoin Cash not as the primary thing, but as the enabling, right? It's an enabling thing, a niche thing where it says, look, global research is an important deal, and it has to be funded from everywhere. Everybody has to be able to participate in it. You can't have this parasitic publishing system where only the rich are able to access it, and then everybody else can fuck off. Fuck you. You can't afford the subscription for our expensive ass journal. Pirate it or whatever it is you have to do. No. That doesn't work. For global surgery, you need to have access to everybody. So they use BCH because it serves this niche where it says, look, anybody anywhere with a phone can have just a little bit, like 10 cents worth of BCH or $1 worth of BCH. And that will be enough to access the research. And the system is made so that it works that way. So he's made it to where it serves his niche very well. And Bitcoin Cash just enables one small part of it. So I've been impressed. It's a good example of serving a purpose very well, understanding the niche that it's in, and then using Bitcoin Cash to kind of enable this one edge that wasn't possible before. Because in the past, if you're living in a country that's not well served by PayPal and credit card companies and so forth, you go to Elsevier or one of these research publication platforms, and you're like, hey, I'd really like to read this research. My patient has something that sounds just like this. Fuck off. You don't have access to the payment network. You don't have access to the research. So I love that he's identified this particular niche that it's going to grow from. Let's see. Yeah, and I know there's another person in the audience here. Noel is there, who has since forever ago, since the very beginning of Bitcoin, noticed, hey, I need something on the network that has payments available to anybody in a way that works without having to go through the very slow, manual, tedious, failure-prone legacy finance system. And he identified that before almost anybody else I know. And he built his product and business around this fact that, hey, there's this thing that can provide global payments that are very, very low friction. So I know there's people who have found this and used BCH to enable their business cases that previously weren't possible. And Jogs.one is one of those. All right, I haven't seen any hands up from the audience, so we're going to wrap up. And thank you all for your time. I hope this was useful for you. I hope that people who are considering running flip starters or starting businesses will consider these lessons that we learned through pain and others have learned to make sure that you start something that has a good chance of being successful.
Not just pain, extreme pain.
Extreme pain. And I hope also, as I posted on Twitter, that people who consider pledging or investing in businesses or flip starters or whatever, I hope you will be a bit of a hard ass. You don't need kid gloves. You don't have to agree to every single thing that somebody publishes. Just because they published it and you're worried, I don't want to discourage them. No, we're beyond that. Take off the kid gloves. If somebody publishes something that you think, okay, I think they have good intentions, but this is going to fail. If you think that, if you look at it and you're able to perceive that, you're doing a great disservice to yourself, obviously, and to the larger purpose and profit of growing the value of the BCH network by not telling them, look, this isn't a good plan. This is not a good proposal that you've made. You must improve it. You're going to be doing yourself and them a service to do that, because capital allocation is kind of the evolution of economics. You do it wrong, you're going to die. You do it well, you're going to be successful. So make sure that the people you support are doing it well to the greatest degree you can. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. It's been good to talk about the subject. We've been thinking about this for many years, and we'll continue to think about it, and we may have another space at some point to discuss additional details. I hope this will create some discussion and thought and additional profit for everyone. Okay, take care, everybody. It's good to talk with you. Talk with you again next time.
Thank you.
Bye.